going. This is really great because I see a lot of people I don't know, which is very encouraging. My name is Chad Weckler. I'm the founder of Hudson Creative, and this is Kurt Hendricks and Richard Wallace. Mark Orton was going to be here tonight, but we found out he is not feeling well. The four of us have been working diligently to get Hudson Creative up and running. We created the website and a survey that we have online. I don't know if any of you have taken the survey that we have on hudsoncreative.org, but if you haven't, your future job is to go there and fill out that interview. We have a handout, which I should take, which has two parts. And I found that when anybody talks about what is a makerspace, a lot of people don't know.
Does everybody here know what a makerspace is?
That's a good question. Everybody know what a makerspace is?
If you don't know what it is,
say it
raise
for
your
the
hand.
camera anyway.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what a makerspace is?
No.
Good start.
It's a good start, and I tried to put some quotes down as to generally what a makerspace is. The makerspace movement, actually the hackerspace movement came first. That was probably about 1995, 96, started in Europe, and there are still hacker spaces. Hacker and maker basically is the same thing. You're making something out of nothing, or you're improving something, usually handmade, or it could be computer oriented, it could be furniture, it could be metal, textiles. And the idea of the makerspace has always been a collaborative, open, working atmosphere where I think the best example is to take a look at Planet Fitness or a gym where you're paying a monthly fee to go there anytime you want during the month, spend as much time as you want, do all the equipment that you want, just for a monthly fee. And one of the things that we realized in doing a makerspace was, in doing the survey, is to find out the interests of the community. And I would say 75% of the responses came from Columbia, about 15 from Greene County, and we've had responses from Ulster, Dutchess, and also the Troy, Albany area. They're really, except for the Makerspace, Kurt, you've been to the Makerspace in Troy. How would you explain that Makerspace?
It's a large makerspace. It's on 2 floors of a bank building that they reclaimed. They started in a parking garage that gave them some space and attracted a community, and then went and found grants and found the space and moved into that about 1.5 years ago, or about 2 years now probably. So they, like Chad mentioned, they have a membership where you can come in and use different gear. You have to be certified on it first so that you're using it safely. And then some of the gear that they have is specifically, like, they have a table saw which will stop if you, like the guy who sold it to him literally stuck his thumb right up into the spinning blade and it just stopped instantly. So they've, you know, they're bringing this kind of stuff to people who are novice users, people who might have strengths in glass work or printmaking or whatever that have always been curious about, say, woodworking. So this creates an environment where you can explore woodworking, see what you want to do with it, and not have to make a big investment, and have access to people who are passionate about it and know more than you do about that particular area. So a lot that goes on in a makerspace. It is, somebody called it a gym for nerds. They said, you know, going back to your Planet Fitness thing, but the idea is that, you know, there's an exchange there that you can, if you want to come in and use the tool and you've got your project and your focus, you can do that. But there's also classes and groups and things that if there's something that you have a common interest in, so there's a social side to it as well.
And I think a lot of people have found through makerspaces, and if you go to our website, hudsoncreative.org, there are a list of examples of makerspaces around the country and their website that you can go to. Some of them have video walkthroughs that you can go and see what they look like and the equipment that they have and the people that are working there. They're often used for instance, a commercial kitchen, which we have on the survey, which seems to be very something that's really wanted locally. There's only a few in the Hudson Valley that are kind of small, but a lot of commercial kitchens, let's say you're making spaghetti sauce in your kitchen and you're taking to the farmer's market and you're selling them, and you run out of all your spaghetti sauce and you go home, you make more, you go to a couple more, you sell out. Well, going to a commercial kitchen, what's called co-packing. Co-packing is when you can go to a commercial kitchen, find other people who know how to cook, know how to use the equipment. They become your team and help you get that product, make more product to your specifications. They may be there to help clean the bottles, put on the labels, make more sauce, and it's all under the scope of the actual person whose idea it was. And also in the making process, someone who's making, let's say, a very successful desk, which could be out of metal, wood, or a combination thereof, you're also going through the same situation where you're not making, if you could make more product to fill the need within this collaborative makerspace, people may become part of your team and help you get that product out to market. And also one of the great things about a makerspace, and community is stressed in every form of a makerspace. It's a meeting of the community. You could just go and see what other people are working at because it's an open concept. A wood shop might be the size of this room, and the intent would be to have windows available so that people on the outside could be looking in. Since it's a dirty space, you want it enclosed. But there are clean rooms, for instance, maybe for more for textiles and ceramics and photography was actually pretty interested to see. A lot of people wanted to learn traditional photography, and I was quite surprised to see that photography darkrooms are making a comeback. But the idea for this tonight is to plant the idea in the community for you to be interested, for you to talk to your friends and neighbors and fellow artists and entrepreneurs and help build our team. And one of the things on this card that all of you have, and it says interests, is to eventually build a team for every discipline. So everybody who's involved in a workshop has experience, would like to be on the workshop team, will work together, figure out all the equipment that is needed. Maybe, as Kurt said, table saw, we actually need 2. If we have so many people, which we do, that's the top need for our community is a wood shop. Maybe we need 2 table saws. Besides the table saws and all the other equipment are the accessories, the cost of the machinery, the upkeep of the machinery. For them to suggest we need a shop supervisor who can get the equipment repaired quickly and know how to do that. So it's building that template, and we do it for all the disciplines possible. So then we have square footage available, we have an idea of the finances available to get it going, and as we build our own virtual makerspace, then and only then can we approach spaces and approach funders. Just to have a great idea is good, but to have something tactile is going to be very important for us. At this point, any questions so far to any of our experts?
Well, are classes included in this project program? I mean,
I would
these are very
say,
physical activities. What if you were interested in writing? You wanted to collaborate with other writers or take a writing class, creative writing, poetry?
what's very popular in makerspaces are individual rooms for, let's say, meeting rooms, where you can rent a room for X amount of dollars for a square footage. And say you have a private meeting with some potential business people, or you want to discuss whatever the topic is. I find those not only makerspaces, but what are called co-working spaces. And co-working spaces is something else that's different from a makerspace. Co-working spaces, usually when you rent a desk in a room like this, and they're all tied up to a printer, and you can go and work, but you're also in an open atmosphere, so you can meet fellow writers, people who are working on their own. Ours is not really a co-working space, but by being in a room where you can walk by people who are sewing, and you see what they're doing, you might form a collaboration with them. And from our survey, to get back to the survey, there are 4 categories that people had to answer. Are you an artist, professional, entrepreneur, hobbyist, or student? Goes like that. Top, most people are artists. Second are entrepreneurs. Hobbyists are third, and students are fourth at this time. Because I would love to have families discuss with their children the opportunity that a makerspace can provide. And I'm old enough that when I was in grade school, we had shop. Anybody go to school and have shop? Do you think that happens anymore?
No.
I don't know if schools have shops anymore.
Or home ec?
Home ec was also in our middle school. Perfect 10, I think, organization that's here in the Armory, I think they're helping to fill that gap a little bit. And the vast majority of people want to take classes. They want to learn welding and jewelry making and how to do coding and all the other things that we've put together. And we have already a pool of people who want to teach classes, which was great through the survey to find out. Now we can put the two together. We really want to grow that survey. I wish we had a space. My idea is a big space. I think big. Makerspaces range from 1,000 square feet and up to 40,000 square feet. They're usually in schools, libraries, and their own standalone facilities. I would say that libraries especially are trying to incorporate makerspaces like the Germantown has a makerspace primarily. It's very small, but it's making things, and we want to instill bringing back making back to our community. There's also a term, and Chris Stapleton is in the back from Digifab Shops, who we worked when we were going through the BRI process, we often were shoulder to shoulder talking about what Digifab Shops is doing in finding qualified workers And I find that that's not the only business around here. There are other businesses that would love qualified plumbers, qualified welders, qualified sewers. There are a lot of businesses and artists who are coming to the area that I see on Facebook all the time. People, do you sew? Can you paint? Can you do this and this and that? And the Makerspace, being a community space, can be an outlet for that potential. Richard Wallace has experience in technology, and Richard, maybe you could talk a little bit about. You could call us the other Silicon Valley.
Well, yeah. So my background really was as a journalist, and I covered started covering the technology industry in 1976, before there was a personal computer, and I did that for about 40 years. So I had the good fortune of watching the process of technology and technology development really not just change our society, but change the world that we live in. I'm an English major, so I'm more inclined to align myself with the writerly types. So I'm sort of an accidental techie, if you will, because I learned about the technology industry from being involved in it. And I've been in Hudson now for 3 years, and in the time that since I've arrived here, I've really given a lot of thought and looked around and did a lot of research about what's going on locally here in terms of technology support. I have a little technology kind of newsletter website that I write for, and I was trying to see if there's enough critical mass to kind of support that within Hudson or whatever. Well, there probably is within the region, but in looking around, particularly Columbia County, I would say really exclusively Columbia County, didn't get much chance to get over to Greene County. The thing that strikes me about this area is the enormous amount of highly creative people that are just everywhere. I'm sure everybody in this room is probably creative in some way that I don't know about. My point is this, and I think this is really, I went back over this material that Chad put together, and I really couldn't agree more with the basic with the basic model here, which is a mindset of community partnership, collaboration, and creation. And I think what's important here, from my point of view, is that mentioned, no more shop classes in school. Well, that's, I think that's a terrible thing for our kids in terms of giving them access to being able to use their hands besides just their brains. Sports is great and all that sort of stuff, but I think the idea and the concept of physically being involved with something, no matter what it is, to use your hands. I'm a writer, but the truth of the matter is the greatest satisfaction I get is when I create something with my hands, and maybe it's just native to me. Everybody probably has this basic instinct. So I really had this sense that there's something missing from Hudson. I don't know what it is, the catalyst to bring those things together. Hudson certainly has a really interesting commercial development background in terms of drawing the antique industry, and this is going through cycles. But these are very commercial in nature. They're not so much tied into how do we serve the community. They come in and they pay their taxes and all of that. That's great, but what about the community here? There's a lot of young people in Hudson. The school is nearby. I happen to be friends with Nick Zakos, who is the youth director for the city of Hudson, and we mentioned this to him just briefly. He sees this as a thing. If he could bring kids from the youth bureau into these kind of programs, he'd be delighted, and we'd be delighted to do that. So as soon as I ran into Chad and heard about what he was doing, I really was very happy to kind of get on board and see what could be done here. So I guess the basis of what I'm saying here is that I think there is I think there's a great demand for this, and I think that it could make a real difference in the fabric of the community. I love the whole community concept of it because frankly, and Hudson's good at this actually, but in general, community is something that it seems is being eroded in our lives rather than encouraged and built up. And to do it for something very kind of grassroots like this, which is connects creative people and connects their creativity with their concept of community. It seems like a very natural thing to me. So I'm with Chad and Kurt and Mark on this completely. And I think the key is to find out. We can't just build a makerspace and then invite, and then 6 months and you'll all come back. I think the whole idea here is it's going to come out from you, from your thoughts, from your ideas. I know Chad's asked you to write down some thoughts about things. So I think that's a good beginning point to collect, where is, the one thing I can say about makerspaces, I've only been in a few, but I've been to maker fairs and all that sort of stuff, is no two of them are alike. They all are very different, distinctly different, and I think this is more intuitive than anything, but I have a sense that Hudson could have an absolutely incredible makerspace because, number one, it's got enough critical mass in terms of community. It's extremely community-minded. There's an awful lot of people. I've been in this room many, many times for events, and it's rare that it's not filled with people. And this is a great turnout tonight to see people that are interested in this. So I guess I would just add and encourage all of you to think a little bit about the concept of a makerspace, what you might be able to bring to it, what you might want to get out of it, other people that you might think want to be involved. Chad thinks big, that's great, but I think, big things start with little small, solid components to them. So I think that's what we're looking for here. I think we're looking for the basis of some things that we can start with, put together, bring some ideas to. But most importantly, I think, somebody asked about, could there be writing classes? Sure, there could be writing classes if somebody is willing to organize it and somebody's willing to step forward and be a teacher. And I think that's the thing. There's not a lot of young people in this room, so we have to muster the energy of, that we have at this point, which I think is driven by enthusiasm and great hope. So anyway, in that regard, I hope everybody steps forward and feels that they can contribute something.
And I would also say that one of the key words we haven't used yet is affordability. I would say, certainly if you're an artist or a maker of some kind, especially here in Hudson, to find available rental spaces, no matter what the size, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month. And some people are, I think, getting creative of saying, well, I have an extra room or I have a garage and I'll rent it out to you. The typical makerspace fees, and I don't want to tie us down to an exact figure because we don't know this yet, but if it was my intent, that gym fee would only be about $100 a month. To have 5, 6, 7 days a week availability. At this point, definitely not 24 hours. We need to start something that's very simple, but that works out to about $3 a day. And then on top of that, there is the opportunity to maybe rent a cubicle, which would be a little bit more. Let's say you're working on a big project and you need to store metal or lumber. Well, maybe there's a storage fee. To take classes, there would be a discount for Hudson Creative members and a little bit more for non-members. So there are some maker spaces that have angel funders charge nothing for a membership. Well, I love that. Sorry, some charge up to maybe $150, $250, which is not a direction personally that I want to go to. Yes?
So are these typically 501c3s, or are they a group of people get together to purchase the building and then, I'm just not really clear on how you would get access to the structure to then develop it into something. Do you have any history on any other?
Makerspaces are both profit and nonprofit, and I think the advantage of a nonprofit is grants and funding, primarily from New York State. I know Center for Gravity is a nonprofit, and they've had funding in six figures to purchase a building, outfit it. They're one of the few state certified incubators, business incubators, and you have to be a full 501c3. Hudson Creative is recognized by the state as a 501 or a nonprofit, but I'm reluctant at this point to take it to the 501c3 until the community figures out, we figure out what we want to do with the Makerspace and make it for profit or nonprofit. Right now I'm thinking nonprofit for state funding and also the tax deductibility for angel funders and such. But it's every, Richard said, they're all different. Each Makerspace is different. Yeah.
How do makerspaces deal with the variability in space needs over time? In other words, you might start out with a bunch of woodworkers, and then they lose interest, and they've got all this space, and the sewers might start out small, and they need...
They revolt. They want more space.
That's right. I mean, are there formulas or are there ways that people have been dealing with these kind of variations in spatial needs over time?
I mean, Kurt's looked into this also.
Yeah, when we started this, I did a lot of research with Troy just to see what they thought they had done right and what they'd been challenged with. And they're on 2 floors. So the lower floor tends to be, the first floor is at street level, the other floor is below that. The lower floor is polished concrete so they can reconfigure it, they can change the size of stuff. And certain things need to be sort of curtained off. So welding and woodwork where they're throwing a lot of sawdust that you don't want in the other spaces. Those are somewhat defined. Up on the first floor it's much more fluid. So they've got desks for co-working space, they've got about 9 3D printers on one side, and they've got sewing. And sewing includes a textile sewing machine and about 3 or 4 really pro-level garment style machines. Those go into a closet when they're not using them. They go into so the space is, in answer to your question, the space there can be reconfigured depending on how much space they need at a given time. It can almost on the fly, that if they needed more space for a few hours, there's ways that they can sort of push into the adjacent space with one of these things. And longer term, they've had more challenges, I think, in just adding things. Somebody wanted to do glass melting, and so they had to create a space where they could do that was ventilated and can handle the heat and some of the fumes and stuff from that.
There's a question back there.
I guess my question is, what does the community do to help make this happen? And how do we keep an open dialogue? How do we all contribute so that we can get what we want and actually push forward? Because at this point, I love all of this conversation, but I feel a little bit like I don't know how we go beyond just talking. Is it a big question?
Well, this is the beginning. This is our first public meeting.
Yeah.
When we had the process of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, I don't know if other projects were ever given the opportunity. Certainly we weren't, to do something like this. Although in hindsight, we probably should have had a public meeting around that time to help inform the city and such. But the survey has been really great, because out of the survey of roughly 200 people, I sent out over 125 emails for people who said I would perhaps, or I would definitely want to be involved in the creation of the Makerspace. And there's only 3 or 4 of us, 5 people that are doing it right now, but we would love members of the community, whether they're artists or parents or kids, to step forward and say, let me be a part of your group and let me do some grassroots. And Dan Udell, who's here, who's videotaping, this will be on YouTube. It'll be great to make that available to the community to hear what we're talking about. So this is a grassroots kind of thing.
I want to know what I should be doing because I think this is great and I would love to have it. Like, I'm a potter and there's nothing in this town for ceramic artists to work or collaborate with. So to have a space like this would be fantastic.
Well, you know, 33% of the people who responded said there were ceramics, and I just to give you an excuse me, an idea of how many people that is. The wood shop, which was number 1, about 99 people. That's 99 people said they wanted to be involved in the wood shop, and of the ceramics, 66, and the lowest, which was the recording studio, 31. So in real numbers, that's potentially a lot of people. And, you know, for the, let's say for ceramics and pottery, is to get a lot of those people together on their own in a subgroup to say, we're all involved in wanting to do the same thing. Who has recommendations for kilns and different kinds of kilns, and what's the voltage requirements, and what are the supplies? How much storage shelving are we going to have for the raw materials, and how much for the finished materials, and you know, what are we going to be making, for instance, and how much time will all of you spend, so we can get an idea of how big we get, how expensive it is. So let's put you in charge of ceramics.
That's how it happens.
Yes.
I'm going to stand. Somebody introduced a gentleman named Chris Stapleton.
He's
To your Chris. My name's Roland Butler. This is the first time I have met Chris Stapleton, even though we both manufacture cabinetry and millwork in the same building. All right. To give you, when you talked about community and the need for community, it's interesting how close people can work together, but never have met. I mentioned this by way of saying, and I'll sit down now, what I think an excellent way to move forward here, and maybe you already have, is to establish a way where the people in this room and other interested parties can get in touch with each other through your website. Is that, I don't have a huge online presence, so
there's a way to work it out. Yeah.
all right, but is there I guess what I'd like to see is some sort of, and I don't know if your website already has this, but if there is a way people who are interested, for instance, in, you know, volunteering to make the space happen, can they sign up there or get in touch with other people, or if you're a potter, see who has, you know, in the short term, before the Makerspace develops, if somebody has a kiln. My daughter is a potter, and that was always a thing for us. Well, we have the wheel, but nobody has a kiln.
Sounds like a
So,
boy.
well, right, but y'all never met each other, and I was thinking, you know, it's probably a lot easier to have that on a website than it is to get people in a room at the same time.
I like that idea.
So I guess I would be asking that of you, since I think you're the one behind the Makerspace website.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Great idea.
Yeah, actually, Mark Morton set up our WordPress website, which is very basic. As you may recognize, we have no building at the moment. We have no funding at the moment, so everything has been done volunteer and free as much as possible. Being here is free, which is really great. I don't think we're in need of funding right now, but I think as, you know, a forum creating forums for all the different disciplines where people can chime in, I think is a great idea. I'd like to work that out maybe with our website, make it more user-friendly, for instance. It's a great idea, I like that. Back there.
Hey, Chad. My name is John Kane. Chad and I have discussed this before. I have a couple of questions. The first was, what was the structure of the survey? Who was it sent out to? Was it just Hudson residents? Was it regional? Was it individuals? Was it businesses?
It was purely social media.
Social media. And was that social media through a group of Hudson Creative?
No, it was just putting it out there and me pumping Twitter and Facebook, please, and also, please take our survey.
Do you know if these were 200 responses from the city of Hudson?
No, only 75% was from the county.
75%?
And not everybody gave their, some people didn't give their name and contact information. Some people didn't. They just wanted to give their opinion. Some people were extremely enthusiastic. So I'd like to figure out ways, whether it's through the YouTube, through newspaper coverage, to get more people to take the survey. And if anybody has any ideas about getting that word out, I'm more than willing to listen to those ideas.
So, because my point is that, well, I think that a makerspace in Hudson that is reachable to people without a car is awesome, especially because we are an urban space with limited abilities in our homes to have makerspaces. So that, it seems to provide the most benefit. I think there's probably some regional pull to that, for people in Ghent or people in Catskill to come in and use a facility like this.
I actually had a couple of people from Ulster County who said they'd be more than happy to drive 40 minutes to come to a fully functional makerspace here in Hudson.
To that, has anyone spoken to employers? I know Kickoff Shop is here, but those are not the only kinds of employers. I work in hospitality. I see that there was commercial kitchen space in here. I know that every restaurant in town is constantly complaining that there's a dearth of skilled workers in kitchens. So to have a space to provide those, those foundations, those foundational elements might give employers a leg up here to be able to hire more experienced people. And I say that because, just like DigiFab Shop, those employers might be willing to throw in a little bit of cash as you grow to sort of get things going.
There is from what I know, Philmont has a newly created co-op, which I think there is a kitchen involved, but it cannot take in too many people. And I believe as part of the DRI process, which was funded, William Farmer and Sons wanted to do a small commercial kitchen teaching facility, also very small. I think with the numbers that we've put together, we need something larger for a commercial kitchen. And you're absolutely right that, to show that interest and get a forum of those people together and invite some of the people from regional local restaurants to work together would be a perfect alchemy.
And as we talk about our sense of community, I would like to point out that Alexander Church from Newburgh came and talked about changes that they made in zoning laws in the city of Newburgh. And one of the things that they are allowing for with their changed zoning laws is cottage industries, so that people, rather than having just retail space on the ground floor, can have creative production spaces. And this has allowed a lot of small businesses to get started, to incubate. So something like this, when people are building their skill sets, when people have room to work, also may allow a contribution to that sense, that entrepreneurial sense of a maker community. And there might be an opportunity for those two to sort of tie together.
There's another concept that Richard came across, is it in Kingston? a rather new concept that I hadn't really
So
seen.
is this the Idea Lab?
Yeah, the Idea Lab.
Yeah.
Can you-
That's, well, it's not quite a makerspace, but it's something that would interface well with a
What
makerspace.
is an ideal lab?
So there's a company, I think it's on the West Coast, and basically, I would define it as a cookie cutter operation for creating high technology startup companies. That's really what it is, okay? So so it has a venture capital behind it, and then it has an experienced management team behind it, and what they do is they go and they sort of handpick, go through business plans, and they say, you know, oh, this could be $1 billion business, let's throw a bunch of money at that. So they developed this concept. They've got 20 or 30 kind of signature companies that are on their website, idealab.com, I think it is. They struck an agreement recently with a related company in Rhinebeck that had some space and was doing some commercial work to set up basically their second iteration of this Idea Lab. So basically, it's quite distant from the Makerspace concept, but basically, why is it good? You know, why would it be good for for Rhinebeck? Why would it be good for the Hudson River Valley? For this reason, and that is that it's great that people have the facilities to develop a business or an idea or a product or some idea in a makerspace, but it's also very important that they get funding for those ideas. And so one of the, I think, great differentiators, if you will, between, say, Silicon Valley and every other wannabe tech area is the missing factor is almost always investment capital. People would much rather go and bet on a short thing out of Silicon Valley than they would go take a spin on some unknown farm-related thing in Columbia County. But the good news is that that's starting to change. The perception of Silicon Valley as the mentor of all things good has changed, and so these opportunities exist much more widely. And so again, I think there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurial growth and for startup businesses, not necessarily all high-tech, in the Hudson River Valley, and it's good now that somebody's bringing in, you know, tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital to grow these things. But
Do you know the name of the company that they partnered with in Russia?
no, I'll give you a reference to it later, John. I wrote it up. You can read about it. But I want to come back to something that you were talking about earlier in relationship to some of the discussions that went on during the DRI, and specifically your references to a commercial kitchen and the desirability for that. And again, this is kind of a general comment, but I think it's important. And that is that, again, Makerspace is interesting in that it's not really an end in itself. It's sort of the beginning of something that could lead to something that's much bigger. And so it's sort of a core element of something. But one of the things about the commercial kitchen idea that, this came up actually, I remember, during the DRI discussion, and actually it was from Mike Tucker, I think, mentioned this. And that is that as a makerspace, if you can make a connection between the activities of it, whether it's woodshop, metalworking, ceramics, textile, whatever it is, and the ability to prepare or to fill existing positions in companies and businesses, regionally, locally, wherever, in other words, what they call workforce development, okay? There is money for that. There is money for training from the state of New York. There's grant money for that. So again, there's a lot of things that nobody would ever give a makerspace money for. And that's kind of why we probably don't have one, because you have to go out and find another way to do it. But once it exists, again, it provides a very valuable function. And one of the things I think that we could do personally in this area is provide both the space and the means and the mechanism for fueling some of these neat businesses that need specialized workforce, and whether it's in the entertainment or the food industry or other industries. Again, it's a missing element, I think, in not just the community, but in the world that we live. Every business in Columbia County is looking for skilled people. Nobody's doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Can I just suggest, I mean, you're talking about doing a virtual forum, but it seems to me what you really want to do is get people physically together as soon as possible who have common interests. And
That'd be great.
Yeah.
and so to come up with a system for you, meet up or using some other method of, because people can talk online forever.
Yeah, I definitely, that's why I like a meeting like this, to actually talk to people and have people here who ask questions and there's a back and forth. But yeah, I can send out an email to 125 people and maybe, usually 5 or 10 percent show up. Even for this meeting, quite a few, but
they'll be the ones that work.
yeah, I mean, you won't be alone because it'll be your task to grow that group. And the diversity of age and experience and interest, and you might get somebody in the ceramics group that has absolutely no experience doing ceramics, but they are like, oh, I am in because, when I was a kid I made it, but now I want in. And I think part of the acquisition of equipment is getting it donated. A lot of equipment can be donated. Some can be leased, but I think donation is a large part of how makerspaces keep going. But as Kurt pointed out, and I've heard it from Chris Stapleton, you want that table saw with that break in it, so that when you put something that shouldn't be there, you don't have an accident. So you get that top of the line equipment. When I was in wood shop, we all had our wooden block tables, but we all had drill presses. We had our little plastic helmets. But here, I'm in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and we were entrusted in making things. We made lamps, sculpture, and all sorts of things. And I think if you read a lot of articles about the maker movement, is bringing that back to younger people, that interest. Just going to university is not going to solve your future problems in a profession. Potentially, this low-scale manufacturing, I think, is going to grow, where you can start to make small things, and Etsy has tried this also. A couple of years ago, they wanted to, and they attempted to work with qualified shops around the country and match them up with some of the makers in Etsy who wanted to expand their jewelry line or their pottery line, and to find a qualified studio that could help them make more of that product. So this potentially could be for something like that.
Etsy has now what they call a makerspace. Have you heard of that, or are you familiar with it? Here in Hudson.
No.
Apparently it's little used. I assume its focus is crafts. And probably not highly machinery dependent, I don't know. But yeah, I've heard about it a couple times. It might be worth following up.
One of the things that I put forward, and Kurt had a great idea about how to introduce the public to what a makerspace can be, which was to do sort of a Fix It Friday kind of event.
Right. Which they've had in various places throughout the Hudson Valley, a fix-in where, the first step would be to contact and network through people in the survey and see who would be able to offer some kind of service and what those are. And then we publicize and say, if you've got an iPhone with a cracked screen, you can bring that, and there'll be somebody there who can help you or can replace that screen for you. Or if you've got a small sewing project that can be done in 10 minutes, but you just don't have the gear and the know-how, somebody's going to be sitting there with a sewing machine. And it just takes place on an afternoon. It's sort of a pop-up, one-time event, but it lets people connect, and it also, just like this meeting tonight, it lets you know the difference between how many people say, oh, that's a great idea, and I would show up if you make it happen, and how many people really do show up. So I thought that was, I still think that's a really good option for sort of a first step.
And another idea I had was number 3 on our survey was 3D printing and scanning, which is extremely popular, and a lot of schools have brought in scanner 3D printers. Now 3D printing could be anything from making a little object out of plastic that you could, the students make themselves, and then they paint them. And a lot of, it's very big in the gaming industry, board games, and all these little 3D printed things. That'd be great for kids to learn how to do something like that. And I know the school has a very popular robotics team that have had competitions. Well, it would be great if they couldn't have access to the school, if we had space for them. And Richard, when we were talking about that, he thought of a great idea would be to find sponsorships for say, a team. Would you pay for their membership to Hudson Creative for so many months, which is a great way to involve the community with the community. So, there's a lot of things that we can come up with ideas.
Thing is, half of the word makerspace is space. Could Hudson Creative start as several spaces? And you're talking about somebody might have a kiln they donate, somebody else has a wheel, or maybe somebody's got a barn that they're not using and they'd be willing to.
That kind of goes into what Kurt's idea was.
Well, there's a few ways that are related to that. In Troy, they started in a parking garage because the guy had space, especially at night, and it was almost like a virtual meeting where people could come at a given time. It was only open between 6 and 11 at night, let's say. I don't know what the real hours were, but and they grew from there. They found a landlord who they said, they took the concept of Makerspace to them and said, look, we're going to take people who have a hobby, and a hobby can become a second income, or it can be a full income. If these people are given access to the right machines and able to develop this stuff. So from a landlord standpoint, if you've got someplace that has a lot of space to fill and you put a makerspace just in part of that, the natural step for somebody who's growing out of that makerspace, who finds something that works, is to look for other space in that building. So it's a way for landlords to fill out space that they wouldn't fill as easily in other ways. We looked at L&M and talked to the landlord there about, this is during the DRI process, and took that kind of concept to them and said, if we got 4,000 square feet in there, don't think of it just as at 4,000. We're gonna bring people to you who need 1,000. They need, they're gonna outgrow the makerspace if it really becomes a business for them.
And what happened?
Well, we didn't get DRI funding.
I'm happy to hear these couple of things that people were just saying just now, because I keep sitting here saying, where's the funding someone's going to go after, or where's the space? Because I think we need something physical to hang on to. It could be virtual, it could be a number of them, but all these ideas, people can generate lots of ideas, and I'm sure we'll have them. But if there's, and I know how hard you've been working on this, but if there's no path to trying to get a foot into some space, I think other things will fall into place, but otherwise it's just everyone has good ideas about how to make things.
I think if I can just add, I hear exactly what you say, and I agree, and I think part of the challenge is to move from this kind of digesting ideas into actually doing something. But I do, to that point, think that what has the most chance of succeeding is something that would be, I would say, demand driven. I would use as an example the person in the back of the room who mentioned pottery and that sort of thing. Okay, that's a very real thing, you know, and it's there, it exists. So I think the thing to do is to start with, so there is demand there. There is demand for something in the ceramics area. There's probably demand for something in the wood area. So rather than try to, as I say, you've got a list here of whatever, 18 people, 18 items here, rather than try to boil the ocean and create one space for everybody, why don't you start with maybe 3 or 4, start to build a basic concept around ceramics. But we would need to hear from you what that is. I poured some stuff in a slip once and made something out of ceramics, but it was a long time ago. But I know how interesting it is as a medium, and I don't know whether you're interested in it as a business or an art or a craft, but all that matters to a makerspace. Do you just want to, do you have a wheel and everything, but you just need a kiln? So that I think I would encourage you to think about that and bring that idea forward to us in any way, shape, or form that you can, so that if I look at it, so this is what there's a demand for,
And will help.
yeah, and then from there we can say, okay, so we don't need to have a place where we set up potter's wheels. It would be nice to show people what they are, but we have to find a space that could accommodate a kiln.
Gentlemen, you had your hand up.
I think I'm good.
Okay, you can answer.
I think we should just move on to become practical now, right? I would be on your team, and I think we should form teams and start maybe, the way I would see it is we form a team in pottery. I'm interested in pottery, other things as well. And we meet privately, and we may come up with a list of things we need to do, and everybody else should do the same thing. And then we get back together. Maybe we can figure out, can we reach out to people? Can we see if somebody donates? And those little groups that we can form right now here, we can reach out then to others, and we can start working on this.
Well, if you filled out that card
Yeah.
and name and contact, put on there all the interests that you are, I'll be gathering those, and through the survey, I've got a nice long list, and I'll take all the people who are interested in ceramics, and we'll work out where there's a contact, and we'll get the people and put them together. Because that's really also one of the intents for this evening.
That's what you said in your email, actually. If people read the whole thing.
Chris?
What's the status of the DRI funds?
I believe the city had to assign a management organization to manage the, I don't know if they've decided that or not.
Some of the not city projects have already started to get going. I think the city had to assign someone. They have not broken ground on anything, but they're plodding their way through the project scale. Things are behind, but we're not the only DRI project that's behind.
Yeah, after the DRI application, I went and I applied for a consolidated funding application from the state. And basically, and I talked to the Upstate Economic Council, they said, well, you failed on 2 reasons. And we kind of touched on those. A, you don't have a space. B, you have not established capital funding. Meaning, nobody wants, at that level, nobody really wants to be the first funder. But if they've seen that you've established, you got the idea, you've established a space or 2, and you've already had a couple of funders come in and say, we'll grant you $1,000, $10,000, that helps us in state funding. And it also will inform other businesses who may want to be part of the Makerspace concept of, I need welders. I don't see it coming out of anywhere else. I'll work with you, maybe through the schools, where there's something that we'd like to bring to our student body, but we don't have the space of the funding. Maybe the Makerspace through maybe STEAM funding, STEM funding. We can work together. One of the suggestions I made to the library unofficially was to ask them if they had any 3D printers. And they said no, they didn't have 3D printers nor the intention to, but if we could, as a project, collaborate with the library or some other function to say, let's raise the funding, let's figure out who can use it. That'll be a next step for the Makerspace to have 6 3D printers. So there's a lot of collaborating that we can do. Questions? Yeah.
How are you linked at all with the River House project? Is that just filmmaking, and so that's not part of the way you think about it? The one that's connected to the Basilica? The building that they're...
On Allen Street?
Yeah.
I think they're, John, I think they're primarily film production, as I recall.
That's Melissa, yeah, that is primarily film production, and they're offering, I think it's housing and workspace for creative type, but their focus is specifically, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's to get more film production into Hudson and into the Hudson Valley. And so they are at not a level that we are teaching people carpentry, it's that we are teaching people like set design, or we are bringing in set designers who can set up shop here, who may be interested in hiring people later, but they're kind of at another strata of skill building.
Maybe we need more zombie movies. I don't know if you heard about the zombie movie that was made here in the county. Which is coming out this summer. It's going to be a big film. Any questions before? Yeah, Tom?
Well, I mean, it's exciting to hear people talk about very specific ideas, both in terms of the work that people want to do and the tools that you want to get. But I'm curious about what are the next tangible, concrete steps that will lead to us developing a system that will get funds, that will be able to get space, that will be able to organize people around these different teams of, interest. I'm thinking that unless we build a system with clear next steps and goals, the energy is going to get lost.
Yeah.
But if we can create kind of a tight container that has the ability to be flexible, then we could really serve the needs of next steps of development. So I'm wondering if you guys have had, because you've been doing a lot of this work, if you have a tangible next step for us to be part of, give input to.
Well, I think if I'm getting the gist of things, if we can work out our website to offer forums where people can attach themselves to and talk about, and build the teams, the individual teams, which I can draw from emails and through social media and through those connections, get a physical meeting of those people together and give each group a template of what needs to be done. I think we could really start something more tangible. Definitely we need to do.
Because one of the things is, I know we're talking about for-profit, not-for-profit. They're both driving restraining forces to both forms. And like starting to talk about, like if we have enough people who are willing to put enough time in to do grant writing, which takes a lot of time, and the paperwork that goes into following up on grants takes a lot of time. So there's a restraining force about like, are we going to pay somebody? It's going to become part of the grant. One is going to be for profit, where the profit pays for, there's a whole host of things that we could do. And then if we could lock in on a form, that might drive us towards like, oh, we're going to be not-for-profit, so we can seriously seek funds. We can get that status, so we have people on board to write and to manage a grant. Or we decide not to.
Well, right now, I think we have at least I've had a fairly good, and Mark Orton's been involved also, collaborating with the Columbia Economic Development Corporation. They've been very supportive and have helped us through the grant process, and I think they're on our team, not, officially as a project, but definitely as an entity. And I'd like to get the Common Council more involved. I did invite all the Common Council members here. Our mayor and council president were available to come tonight, but they represent the community. I'd like to have their help disseminating that interest. But I think we have a pretty good starting point, thanks to all of you, to get the groups going, get you to physically meet, discuss. You'll come up with ideas. I don't know everything about all these disciplines. The community does. So we'll get those groups going, and through the website and through our Facebook page, we'll disseminate that news. And if we come up with a newsletter that can go out to people to bring people up to date, to say, here's where the meetings are, here's who's involved in those meetings. If you'd like to talk to the chair and co-chair, we need to get that fluid information of back and forth going.
Two of the committees, writing grants and finding real estate, are those two committees that will be on the website that people can sign up for?
I personally think that's part two.
I disagree. Because I think people have to, I do. I could get really excited about several of these topics, and I'd love to participate, and I'd love to learn and work in the space and everything. But I need something a little more to hold on to.
Oh yeah, me too.
Well, and if we put off, I don't know anything about writing grants, but if there are some people that do, and they have a passion around this, I'd be encouraging them to the website. And you all have probably looked at real estate, empty spaces.
Yeah.
What have you seen and what's possible?
I'd love anybody to, let us know. I would say one of my wish lists, John L. Edwards School.
Where's that? Is that going towards?
That's,
oh, it's here.
yeah, the city's looking to purchase it.
So how does one get that idea into
Their hands.
that as a possible part of that project?
That's the Common Council.
Shirsham is on, this is the third ward alderman, who's heading up, looking into the use of jail. They've hired somebody to do a study on that. But if you reach out to Shirsham, he's on the city website, he's the third ward alderman. He would probably be the person to speak to.
All right.
So have you done that? Yet?
That person was invited tonight, but John just gave that information, and we'll do a go-to. And with the video attached. Yes?
Just to build on the basic structure of how you can go forward, and yeah, it seems to me it's pretty evident. If you have a bunch of teams, they come up with a template, you're basically developing data so that they come to you, they've got each one has their own individual needs for space, equipment, people, blah, blah, blah. Someone then has to put that together. Then you've got a good concrete overall plan for the amount of space that you need, and then you can go forward and try and get grants, because then you have an overall concept. So you guys doing that?
That's number one. Step number one.
So you'll be putting together that data?
Yes. Along with any other volunteers who want to help do that. So I like to keep this meeting short. I think we're pretty darn close to closing up shop here. Any last questions, comments before we say good evening?
I'm just curious on the website, because I glanced at it really briefly. Would it be possible to give some detail about the structure that's in place right now?
Sure.
Because I think if people knew the structure, they'd be more inclined to be involved. To me, it's ambiguous. But
Yeah.
that might mean I just don't know.
Does anyone have good experience writing a business plan?
But why?
What? Why?
Yeah, Yeah.
Well, I mean, a business plan is a project plan, it's a roadmap for how you're going to grow this sort of project, whether it's a business.
Well,
or
the first step is what are you doing? And this is sort of
I do have
Right,
some,
fail.
CEDC did allow some funding for us to work with a person to do a business plan, but as this gentleman has pointed out, you need more template in front of doing a business plan. And I think we're really close to doing that. We'll do the step one, and then the step two is, the real estate, the business plan, the funding. I think we got a pretty good starting point. We'll work in tandem with all those other ideas too.
well, the way to put the cart before the horse is to find a space. Discussing this Galvin space, certainly a possibility, and try to organize enthusiasm.
That would be a
about
great
But,
organizing
of course,
motivator.
that's how this happened, this library.
Yeah.
And so if someone wants to track that path,
Well, I've been working on
that's-
that. I will have to
Yeah.
say that
it's not.
before the library, thanks to Mark Orton, before the library came in, I got a tour of the basement for the potential of Hudson Creative. We were very close to MOU of having the space was about 10,000 square feet down there, but the way that it eventually worked is rather than a makerspace, at that time, Eric was thinking that rental studio spaces
Yeah.
would take place, and now it's got its own momentum into something.
Child care is back.
Yeah.
Child care is back.
So we were close, like
In
4
basement,
years
like-
ago, to getting the space. And I'm on Galvin. I've been working
Well, I
on
like
it.
the garage story too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of an organic way of just starting it, but just something physical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not to beat the crap out of this point, but I think this idea of communication seems to be very relevant at this point. I think with like anybody in the room who feels like particularly inspired or just inspired enough tonight to connect, and just whoever it is, if it's 3, 4, or 5 of us in the room who can just like exchange emails and want to be some kind of point person to, whether it's ceramics or anything else, even like general, to like set up being point people to then reach out. Because it feels like what's really being asked for is like to connect makers to then figure out what resources do we already have, what spaces do we already have, what things do we need, and those smaller groups can kind of suss that out in a way, and also even like start to develop their own, whatever it might be, if it's shared working spaces of their own availability, to then even like continue to build out more of an argument for a cohesive space. So yeah, I would just say like anybody who's inspired enough, maybe we just like hit the front corner, exchange emails, and sort of keep stuff moving.
I'm happy for that to happen. Thank you.
If there's any way to have it be regular, like a regular every 2 weeks, we meet at the same space, or.
That'll be up to I think, each group, absolutely. And then if all the groups decide that we need to have another big meeting, we'll do that. And have each group kind of do a report and let the other people know what's going on, because we'll spread that out. It won't be just here, thanks to the videotape. All right.
Awesome.
All right, raise your hands if you want to do something.
Thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks for coming.
This is great.
Good job.